I feel like we're both very frazzled right now, which I know because we just got off the phone like 15 minutes ago being like, what are you doing? Is your hair wet? Are you pulling something out of the oven?
Yeah. That was like the fifth phone call that we had today already.
The other part of what I wanted to mention though is that I feel very, two things. One, I feel like I have acquired some sort of like social etiquette amnesia in quarantine. You know what I mean? I'm just like, I have no idea how to be. And so it's very fortunate that I can't see anyone on the other side of this besides you. And then, yeah, I don't know. I just feel like it's really nice to be like excited about a thing that is happening in your life. And, you know, I think there's a lot of obviously like, I'm sure there are mixed feelings about it not really being maybe a version of a tour that you had envisioned originally. But what else is happening for you this week? Today's pub day.
Today's pub day. Yeah. Yeah, like obviously I was excited about pub day, but I didn't know how I was going to feel just because like I haven't left my apartment since, well, it's been more than 24 hours. So like there's some like solitude to that experience, but it's also, I've gotten so many texts and little messages today. And so it's still a really, I wish I had a cocktail right now, Christina. What are you drinking?
I was so hoping you wouldn't ask me that. I was drinking something very nice, which was like a little vermouth and soda. And then I finished that. But I wanted to still be the illusion of the vermouth and soda. But I panicked and I poured my Stella into my vermouth and soda glass.
All right. That still sounds good.
It's hard out here.
Yeah, I should have thought about that.
That's okay. We were in the shower literally like 10 minutes ago.
Seriously, I didn't quite have the forethought. No, it's been an exciting day and I've had lots of really kind emails and text messages from people. So I did, even though I've been home all day and actually like baking, it's a really exciting day. And this week is certainly different than I imagined it would be. I regret that I'm not able to have like a celebration with friends and colleagues and people that worked on the book in person. So, you know, all my events for the book are virtual, like this one. You know, I would like love if you and I were together in person, IRL, but this is the next best thing. And yesterday I had Good Morning America, where I had a crew arrive at 4:45 a.m. in my apartment, which is like not very big. And they like had so much stuff with them and took up the whole living room. And, you know, that was a 3-minute segment and it was actually really fun and I had a good time. So I have some stuff like that. I'm doing a morning show in LA tomorrow. That'll be nice.
Let's talk about that. Because let's talk about that because you're in the middle of making like a million things right now. Like
yeah, they wanted me to have. I just got my hand in this. They wanted me to have stuff made, so I have like filling for my apple and Concord grape pie, and I have stuff over here for my kabocha turmeric tea cake. So I'm like, it's been busy. I've had stuff to do, but it's still really exciting, and I have a couple more virtual events this week, and it feels nicely spread out. So it's not too overwhelming. Plus, like I don't have to leave my house to do it. So I can do things like shower 10 minutes before the event starts like I did tonight. So it's good.
Well, but the funny thing about, I guess, what has the experience of doing television segments been like from home? Because it's like, you can't really have hair and makeup, I assume. You can't have, you're making all your own stuff. Like you're making all the beauties that are showing up in the segments, right? So it's just all of a sudden like you're doing everything.
Yes. I like went to the farmer's market to buy a bunch of apples for the apple cake that I made for the GMA segment. And, you know, so it is like more legwork, but I like doing that kind of work and I have the time to do it. And of course, being a very type A Virgo, like I like having control of every step of that process. So it's like, you know, there's give and take and there's pros and cons to the whole thing, but it's going well. And I have like so many wonderful supporters, and Clarkson Potter, my publisher, has been so great. And so it's all just like fun stuff. And I do feel like I can enjoy it because I'm not, well, it's also like the first day, so we'll see. But I think being able to be home for all of it means like I'm less exhausted and less, or hopefully I will be less exhausted and sort of more present to enjoy it all, even though I'm not really there. So check in with me in a week and see what I say then.
Okay, I really want to get to our show and tell because it's like the whole, that's all I've been thinking about all day, but I don't want to get my fingers greasy. So let's do the book first.
Okay.
One of my now 2 copies that I have. I just wanted to show people like what it looks like. And it's, so I just got it this afternoon, as you know. Thank you to your publishers and Books Are Magic for both separately rush sending me copies. And the thing that I noticed immediately about seeing it in person, is I love how big it is.
It's big.
It's like really nice and hefty, and just like the kind of book that I feel like you just want to keep open on the counter and actually cut from, which is really nice. And obviously it's just like, I obviously appreciate that there's like a recipe for, there's a photo for every recipe. Everything looks, I'm just like looking for like the best example. And look, I just happened to open up to the iconic birthday cake. Every time I look at every single page, I just think about our friend Sue Lee, who styled all of these recipes. Yes. And like really just, she's so phenomenally talented.
I know. The amazing Sue Lee and her, she has like, we had a whole team of people. So like Alex Lau, who's the former staff photographer at BA, shot it. Sue and her like fantastic culinary assistants, L'Oreal and Pelicano, and Sue's Kim. And it was like the most stressful, most fun. And I just feel the way about the shoots that I feel about the whole book, which is like, I only remember the good parts, which is great because that makes me want to do it again. And it's like, so that was we shot the majority of the book back in January, and it's weird to feel, that was this year. Like, it's weird to feel nostalgic for a time that was like 9 months ago.
You want to jump even further back? And I was thinking about it this morning as I was thinking about just questions to talk about tonight, was my 30th birthday. Do you remember that? That was
your 30th. Paint a picture for me.
Was that? That was like almost 2 years ago at this point. It was like 2 Decembers ago, and I came over to your like studio, and you were in the very beginning starting development for the book, and you had made a version of like the persimmon cake that you were like, this is all wrong. And I feel like we just ate a handful of desserts, and it felt like it was still just like a figment, even the fact that there were prototype dishes that were in front of us that we were tasting and talking about at that point was like so exciting.
Yeah. I thought that knowing that the book process takes about 2 years, and coming off of having been in magazines for many years, like that just felt like an impossibly long timeline. And there was,
to begin with, already feel like an impossible timeline.
Right. And it was like, I felt this way the entire time that I was working on it, where I was just like, I don't have enough time, like even to feel that way 2 years before the pub date was a little crazy. And so it was sort of like a marathon and a sprint at the same time. But I think the book is reflective of like for me, the experience of looking through the book now is to like flip through and be like, I have so many memories of creating these recipes. Like every photo and every recipe brings back some kind of memory of where I was and who I was with at the time. And that's really special. And to look at it and to have all of those moments is really like to think, wow, I can't believe I put just so much work into this book. And each recipe, I had more recipes that I made it into the book, but I cut a few just for space and for kind of overall coherence. And so to look at the book is to really feel like, wow, I'm proud of basically every single one of these recipes. And that's an amazing feeling. Like I was saying this to several people recently, like I feel like I really wrote the book that I wanted to write, and that's special. Like that doesn't happen for every first-time author at all. So I'm like grateful to the publisher and my editor who were super supportive and like gently would suggest things like, maybe you should cut this recipe. And I'd be like, absolutely not. And then a week later I'd be like, no, you're right. Like I should do that. So it was a collaborative process, but and just very successful.
Do you remember any off the top of your head that you had to cut?
Well, I cut some like super, super savory recipes that were like, just felt like not of a piece with the rest of the savory chapter, because there is a whole chapter on savory baking. And the motivation behind that was to show that baking can be dinner, like baking can be many different things. It doesn't have to only be dessert. Even though the book is called Dessert Person, I say this in the intro, it's really dessert person. To being a dessert person is like more of an attitude and an approach than like literally like I don't only eat desserts in my life. I eat dessert every day, but I don't only eat dessert. So so you got to eat like
dessert with you.
What?
I was like, I've seen you. I've eaten dessert with you. We eat a lot
Yeah.
of dessert.
Yeah. So it's like this, for savory baking, it was like baking can be a lot of things. So, but I did cut some recipes that just felt like this is just not quite, like, it doesn't quite support the thesis of Dessert Person, even though I liked them and they were good. And so a couple of the cut recipes made it into the, I had a little, what did we call it? If you had pre-ordered the book, a pre-order incentive, we sent a PDF of cut recipes to people that pre-ordered and went to the Clarkson Potter website and like put in their receipt, or I think that's how it worked. And they were good recipes, like recipes I'm proud of, and I'm happy that they have another life. They just didn't quite make it into this book,
Yeah. Well, speaking of the savory chapter, should we do show and tell?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm wearing sweatpants. I'm wearing a new sweater, but sweatpants I'm gonna get up and you might see my sweatpants. So that's just normal. Sorry.
Okay. There's very
I
bad.
see it coming out of my fridge.
Okay. So context is
that it is insane in here.
What is happening?
No, I mean, that's kind of just how it looks.
Okay. Well, so the context is that I thought it would be fun if you and I each chose a recipe for the other to make from the book for this talk. And it's funny because you chose the perfect recipe for me because I'm sort of, I'm just coming around to, I think, the attitude of Dessert Person in my own life. I think I've always just not been so enamored of pastry and cake and just a lot of what I think is dessert. And so I remember when you were looking for cross testers for the book initially, I was just like only fixated on the savory recipes.
Yeah. Well, one thing I say in the intro was like, of course I believe you and give you all the credibility that you deserve and are entitled to, but I just like generally don't believe people when they say they're not a dessert person. Because I'm just like, and I say this in the introduction too, like sweet is one of the 5 flavors. Like you can't just like outright reject sweet things, and I think what people are really saying is they don't like a certain kind of dessert, or they don't like overly sweet desserts, which same. Right. But I just think there's like an ideal dessert for everyone out there, and you just have to find the one that you love, so, but I also, at the same time, again, like I think what you said speaks to the book, which is that like there's something in it for everyone, because if you want to do savory and make the sour cream and chive rolls that you made, then you can make that, or you can make what I made, which is this tart Pezien. It weighs like 18 pounds.
Wait, okay, yes, let's talk about this. So I chose this recipe for you. You made the tart Pezien, which do you want to tell us a little bit about what it is?
Yes. So I went to culinary school in France, and I've always loved like classic French desserts. This is a 20th century invention. So it's from Saint-Tropez, as the name indicates. So tarte Pezien, and it's like a big brioche. It's like a big brioche hamburger bun. And so there's a brioche recipe in the book.
Sorry, I'm laughing because I just saw Alex Beggs left a comment. Sorry, she just left a comment that said that tart is an absolute unit, and I was just looking at it, and I'm like, you look insane right now.
I know. I feel like the perspective is making it look enormous too. So the filling is okay. So it's a tart that was invented by, I think it was I have the anecdote in the head note. I think it was like a Polish baker working in Saint-Tropez, and it is a big brioche, like round, that's split and soaked in like a little sweet syrup, and then filled with pastry cream. And this version is lightened with a little whipped cream. And apparently he made it for Brigitte Bardot, who was in Saint-Tropez filming a movie, and she like loved it, and it became tarte Pezien. I think she named it that. So it's incredibly delicious and kind of surprisingly light given all the like components in it. and it's one of my favorite desserts. Like it's just, I think it's just perfect in every way. And so the recipe is kind of particular about how you make it because, so there's a brioche recipe in the book and then a pastry cream recipe in the book, and then the recipe just tells you how to put it all together. And so you actually pre-slice the top. I don't know if you can see, but there's cuts in the top. Like I've already sliced it. I'm worried the whole thing's gonna slide off the plate, but I'll try to angle it. Like I've already sliced down so you can see. And that's just so that when you go to cut it, when you're serving it for company or something, you don't like squish all the filling out. So I think that that kind of detail is about like, it's kind of, I think, indicative of how I tried to set people up for success in the book with the level of detail in the recipes, because so much about, and I was thinking about this today as I was making all these desserts, like so much of baking is about these tiny little moments of like strategy and technique. And I think technique makes it seem kind of fussy or challenging. And like technique can be something as simple as like beating the cream to stiff peaks rather than soft peaks. You know what I mean? So,
and I love that you have those moments captured in photographs in the book. There's, I forget what the section is called, but there is a section about that covers techniques and like foundational recipes. And it's really nice to see like the image of what soft peaks versus peaks, for example, look like.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like there's a little section called, oh, I forgot what it's called, like endpoints and visual techniques and endpoints, I think it is. It's in the beginning. And it just sort of shows you like visual indicators of, yeah, like what does softly whipped egg whites look like? What does, how do you scrape a vanilla bean? Because as much as you can use precise language, yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, like, right, like what does butter look like when it's starting to brown? So as much as you can describe these things in words, like you just need a visual. And that's why the book has a lot of like little process moments where you see the steps. So like Christina, the recipe you made has that whole like grid of step-by-step recipes for making those, yeah. Oh, here, I'm gonna cut a slice of mine. You tell us about the recipe you made.
Oh, they're still warm from when I frantically put them back in the oven to rewarm 10 minutes before we started talking. Okay, so the recipe that you chose for me are the pull-apart sour cream and chive rolls, which are truly, like, they turned out incredible. I know I'm a little bit scared. I know for a fact these will fall out because you grease the pan with like an absurd amount of butter.
Yes, there is a lot of butter in that recipe. That recipe, I like that. I remember the thing I wrote in the head note, which made me laugh. Something that I wrote made myself laugh. I don't know if it made anyone else laugh, but it was sort of like, I don't really care about dinner rolls unless we're talking about buttery Parker House rolls, and then that's the only thing I care about. So this was inspired by like the most delicious, buttery, fresh, light dinner rolls. So the recipe borrows some technique from like Japanese milk bread or other sort of Chinese baking recipes that use this mixture, this sort of like pre-cooked, almost like a roux, that's added to the dough, and that increases the ability of the dough to hold on to moisture. And what you get are just these super soft, pillowy rolls.
Okay, wait, so I kept them intact in a grid because I wanted to, like, I wanted to do the pull apart.
Yeah, here, I'm showing you also, I hope I don't drop this. But here's the slice.
That is the most ridiculous dessert.
It's so tasty. I'm gonna eat it.
It's not like, I personally, that's not my type of dessert, and that's totally cool.
It might be, Christina. Give it a try.
I would be happy to.
Oh, my friend Emily, who I made this for, just left a comment. It's her favorite dessert, and it's her mom's favorite dessert. I tested this for her. Hi, Emily.
Hello, Emily. Did you see my pull apart?
Wait, let me see. Okay, do it slow.
Okay.
Ooh, yes, Christina, that's looking very good.
They smell amazing. They smell like a sour cream and onion potato chip.
Yeah, that's the was inspiration behind the flavor combination. I've now gotten cream from this tarte de Vesian all over the book, my computer, and my countertop.
I know. This is why I wanted to touch the book first.
Good call.
I've also set myself up with 3 towels.
Also, my mom just left a comment, which is funny. LOL.
Oh, hi, Saucy.
Hi, Mom.
This is also my first time eating these, and they're extremely, extremely good.
Right. So you and I talked a lot about this recipe because it's in the Thanksgiving issue of Bon Appetit. So I think this is a nice Thanksgiving recipe because they would make the best little like turkey slider, you know, like at the day after Thanksgiving.
I don't think these are going to be around the day after Thanksgiving. I guess, to be fair, they make 24.
What?
I guess, to be fair, they make 24.
Yes, it fills a whole pan. So,
and also, I feel like important PSA that recipe, I just found out that recipe is on bonappetit.com today.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. So I still want you to buy the book, but you can find the recipe there if you don't.
Okay, so now that my hands are sufficiently covered in butter,
Wait, hold on, Christina. I am saving this dessert for this LA morning show tomorrow because I needed to kill 2 birds with 1 stone because I'm just one person. I just put it back in the fridge.
Okay.
Sorry, hold on.
Is that going to hold?
Yeah, it'll hold.
Great.
Heavy cream just fell out. Hold on. Oh god. Oh god. Oh well. I'm just gonna put it right here.
To be fair, it's been a chaotic day, and I was really banking on show and tell taking up like a large amount of time, which it did.
That's all right. I was late because I was having technical difficulties, so I think we're on track.
That's true. I do have a couple of real questions though, and one of them is about really like, I guess I was thinking about our friend Sue Lee, who we mentioned earlier, who was sort of like the genius behind the styling of the book. And I was thinking about how much she's like made this point over and over that this is a book in which every single recipe works. It's a baking book where every single recipe works. There's like some shade in there for sure. And like not to go too deep into that route, but I feel like I can't emphasize enough just from witnessing all the work that went into making this book, like how much work goes into making sure those recipes work. And I was sort of like hoping to talk a little bit about what that process looked like for you, like all the way from, I guess, development of the recipes, like as you were working alone, to the point where you're really bringing in like a small army of cross-testers and people who you're specifically employing for really specific feedback and criteria as you like finesse and refine.
Yeah, I mean, that was very nice of Sue to say. And I do think that, I mean, I'm so motivated by wanting people to have a successful result because like you can, otherwise, like, what's the point of writing a cookbook? Like, ultimately, I looked at my job as someone who's there to, like, provide service for people at problem solving. You know, like, people want to learn how to make a pie, so I'm here to help them make a pie. And I want to guarantee as much as possible that someone's going to have a successful result. But I think it's important to recognize, like, people say, like, baking is a science. Okay, like, yeah, there's science involved, but I'm not a scientist. I don't work in a laboratory, and I can't control all of the variables that there are. And there's so many variables when it comes to baking. There's the kind of flour you're buying and the protein content and the moisture. There's the oven that you're baking in. There's the type of pan you're using. There's the season. There's your altitude. Like, there are so many variables, and I try really hard to control for all of those. But I can't, you know, I can't possibly control for every single one. Otherwise, I would literally never finish a recipe in my life. Like, there's an infinite number of times you could test a recipe to account for all of that. So within reason, I did my best, which is just to say that, like, I hope that people bake from this book. And I just want them to know that, like, something might not turn out at some point. And I'm very sorry for that. And I like wish that every recipe turned out perfectly, but it doesn't always happen. And so that's just to say that, like, if something doesn't come out, please try again, and please just sort of like make a note of what went wrong, and try again. And like, I know I say this a lot, I said this a lot in Gourmet Makes, and it does sound kind of, it is a cliche, but like, you do learn more from the mistakes than from the, you know, the successes. And so like, I remember a lot of people I've talked to who have made the brownies in the book, like the amount of time that their brownies baked, it was not enough, you know, like they went to the time range and their brownies were underbaked. And so like, if you made the brownies from the recipe, they came out perfectly in my oven after 25 minutes, but in your oven, they might really need to go like 35 minutes, because it's just, all these things are important. So like, you know, I always tell people who are trying to get better at cooking or baking, like, pick a recipe and make it a bunch of times. You know, it's tempting to want to like move around and make this thing and make that thing and try a bunch of stuff, but that's
like,
really
oh,
the best way to
no.
improve. What?
I'm like, oh no, that's my nightmare. I
Is it
never want to do things. I never want to do things more than once.
I know. Well, it could be like, just make a bunch of recipes with pie dough and make pie dough a bunch of times. You know, like, it's not like you'll have to only eat the same dessert 10 times in a row or something, but so
I will say, you know, pie dough is an interesting example of something that I have actually found myself making actually like more often and more frequently. And what's interesting about that process is it is technically the same product that I'm making, but what I've noticed time and again, like over making it, is that the feeling, the tactile sensations are different every time because of all the variables that are different from day to day. Which, yeah, you know, which can include all kinds of things like the ambient temperature, like the temperature of your ingredients and how quickly you're working and all those things. And yeah, that part is cool because you eventually, I feel like, it's like you kind of imprint a memory for what it feels like to be right. And then once you have that, that rules.
Yes, I mean, that, I actually think pie dough is one of the best examples and kind of illustrating tools that you can use to talk about baking, because it's so simple. There's like 4 ingredients. It's like flour, salt. It's mostly flour, then a little salt, little sugar, butter, and ice water. You know, it's so basic, but it's very true. Like, it's never quite the same way from even using the same recipe from batch to batch. So I totally agree. Like, I've noticed huge variations in just the brand of butter that you use. Like, Kerrygold is a much softer butter and it disappears into the flour more easily than Land O'Lakes or a European style butter. So like, you might be rolling out a pie dough and the butter stays in like really discrete bits versus a different brand where it might kind of spread out into these sheets. Like, it's one of those things where, because it's so simple, you can really detect and sense those variations from batch to batch. I one time made pie dough with flour that must have been like 3 years old, and it took like twice the amount of water that I normally add. So all these things are really important factors, and that's why I love making it. Besides it just being fun and tactile, and you get to touch flour and butter and all that stuff, it's just like fascinating to me.
Okay, I guess my other question there is, like, with each recipe in the book, guesstimate, like, how many times do you think each recipe has been made either by yourself or by other people, like, in the development process? Sub question, which recipe do you think had to be developed and tested the most? Yeah, right.
Yeah. So that's a tricky question, because like, if I had an unlimited amount of time to write a book, which like no one should have an unlimited amount of time to write a book because it's just a recipe for like driving yourself mad, then I could have really stuck with recipes that weren't working. But I kind of have a rule that, like, if after the 3rd try it's not getting better, or it's getting more wrong, or wrong in a different kind of way, then like maybe it's time to kind of move on. Like, you can conceive of an idea in your head and usually it turns out, but there's occasionally times when like it's just not a good idea. You know, like, it's just, the practice of it is just not working. So I would say on average, so that's just to say that I abandoned ideas that just were not working. And often I came back to a recipe, like the brownies I made so many times, and I just kind of had to like put it aside and come back to it because it just wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't getting better, you know, and I was just sort of like, I don't want to keep wasting chocolate and butter and making this recipe. So sometimes I need a critical distance from a recipe, and then I come back to it with kind of fresh eyes and a fresh perspective. I'm kind of backing in your question, but I would say on average, I maybe made a recipe 4 times, possibly 5.
You personally?
Personally, yeah. And then it would get tested. Not every recipe got cross-tested, but there were some recipes where it was just like, I don't need someone to test this. I've made it so many times. I'm really confident. Most of the recipes got tested.
Oh my goodness.
So, and a lot of, like, there were rare times when a recipe came out. I also, like, as time went on, went back to recipes and was like, I want to change this, which is also just like a recipe for
That's the point. You have to just be like, no.
Yeah, that's the point where Harris was like, oh my, like, wow, I can't wait for this to be over. But what was I gonna say about that? Like, even if a recipe turned out kind of amazing on the first try, which is rare. So like one example is, Christina, you've made this the gluten-free, like seedy maple breakfast muffins.
Oh, my favorite.
Right? Which is like a super easy recipe, and they're vegan.
That would be my favorite recipe from the book.
Really? They're vegan, which is not, I don't have a lot of those in the book because I have a really hard time like not using eggs, because eggs are like so foundational. But that was a recipe where I made it and I was like surprised at how good it was in the first try. But I always have to, even if a recipe I think turns out amazing, like I have to make it more than once because I want to try it in a different pan. I want to try it in a different oven. I want to try it with a different brand of whatever, you know. So it's like, I just feel like it's my due diligence, even if a recipe turns out great. Like I'm always just like, there's a chance it was a fluke on the first try. And so I have to make it several times. So sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
Okay, I think I am going to have to curtail myself at a certain point so I can get to some of the very many questions that we have. But I did want to do my segment that I've already told you about, which I've decided to just call overrated, underrated, because overbaked, underbaked was not really working for me. But
okay,
I have come up with a list of things that I would like your personal opinion on, whether you think they are over or underrated.
Okay.
Don't think too hard. These are genuine questions that, like, I think about. Okay. Number 1, sifting dry ingredients. So pre-sifting, like such as flour.
Overrated. But
don't think about it too hard, but I need like more than I need more than just
don't worry. I have many things that I want to say as like qualifications. Okay, so sifting is overrated. I think that it is like a judgment call that cooks need to make if they have like super lumpy. It's not overrated in like a frosting where if you have a lumpy powdered sugar or something, like then you need to, because there's a sense, like there's a point at which like you add something lumpy and like it's never gonna get smooth. But in terms of flour, I think if you're buying flour and you are transferring it into a different container than the one it came in, I think that's really important. Like put your flour, not only to like prevent bugs from getting in it, because that will happen, but to sort of like decompress it and fluff it up. You should be kind of decanting your flour into a container with a tight fitting lid, and then from the container scooping and putting it into the cup measure, and that's so it doesn't get too compact. And the recipe, all the recipes have weight measurements, so for consistency, and I recommend if you have a scale, even if you don't have a scale, get one, because weighing is always more accurate. But that's just to say there's a specific way to measure flour, and I think if you do it properly, it doesn't usually need sifting, but often in the recipes you're whisking the dry ingredients together, and that is kind of taking the place of sifting. But that said, if you have like super lumpy flour and whisking isn't getting the lumps out, you should sift it.
You know what wasn't on my list of overrated, underrated? Decanting flour.
Underrated.
Okay. Number 2, the metric system.
Oh, underrated.
I just put this in because I do really appreciate that every recipe in the book comes with both, like standard cups and whatnot. And
yeah. I mean, look, politics aside, it's a way better system. Like, we should all be using metric. It's like out of 100, it makes the math really easy. It's the way to go. So I like grams. What?
it's so much faster too if you're just like, if you're using a scale and you're just kind of tearing everything one after the other.
Yes, completely. Yes. I mean, weighing is faster in general. I think grams make a lot more sense than ounces. And it just feels more universal and easier, and it makes math easier. You know, like what I think about with like sourdough, it's just so much easier to do stuff in grams. So underrated, probably only by us in the US, and probably the right amount of rated by everyone else.
Okay, number 3, pre-cut sheets of parchment paper.
uh Well, I don't underrate them, but maybe they're underrated like in the population. I love pre-cut sheets of parchment paper. It saves my life. I hate those dumb rolls. You never get a piece that's the right size, or like you never cuts a straight line. I just, they're,
It,
yes.
that's one of those things that you just take for granted in a kitchen. Like, I mean, we just had those in the test
Yeah.
kitchen. And
Yeah.
now when I'm at home, I'm just like, oh, like every time I take out the roll, I'm just like, oh.
Yes. I mean, parchment paper, like from the grocery store, is expensive. And so I go to Webstaurant, which is like a great website that is like restaurant supply, but for the masses. And it's so cheap to buy like a little, I don't know what you call it, like a sheaf or something of like, 100 pieces of pre-cut parchment. It's great. So,
Do you do the like the cake rounds and the like rectangular baking sheet sheets?
I actually like cutting my own cake rounds from parchment. But that said, when I am in a place where they have the pre-cut cake rounds, I do get very excited.
Yeah.
Also, Gabby's, you know that Gabby's here? I wanted to say hi to Gabby.
Hi, Gabby. I saw her name fly by. I like keep getting. I just saw her say hi. Okay, number. I don't remember what number. Oven thermometers.
Underrated. Just everyone get an oven thermometer. It will take all the guesswork out. It'll explain to you why things don't turn out. I like oven thermometers because it makes me feel like it's not my fault. Like it was the oven. So if like this is my friend Emily was talking about before, like her oven is crazy, and I was like, you're not a bad baker. Like your oven is messed up. So get an oven thermometer.
Do you
And
want to know what I just learned after getting an oven thermometer for the first time in my life at home, like this year, is that my oven runs 50 degrees cold.
exactly.
Zero.
Exactly. So you're preheating to 350 and actually you're baking everything at 300. Like makes such a big difference. So ovens to me, I talked about this earlier, like all the variables when it comes to baking. I think that ovens are the number one most variable, if that makes sense. Like it's just where there's the biggest range and differences from kitchen to kitchen. So yes, like oven thermometer will absolutely make you a better baker.
I just saw my roommate comment. I did that.
Yeah,
Rebecca. Okay, I will do a couple more.
Okay.
Wedding cake.
Underrated. I love wedding cake. Even like, here's the thing. I just really like cake, and I like bad cake. Like I like cake that is like objectively not good. Like I'm as excited for a piece of like bad wedding cake as I am for a piece of good wedding cake. Like I don't care. It's unless it's like really dry. But even then, like I'm gonna sit there and eat it. Like I don't know. I love wedding cake.
Wait, so okay, so you got married this summer.
Yeah.
Did you have cake?
I did have cake. I made a small. I mean, we had just our immediate families there, so it's like 12 people total. And I did make a small cake with Harry's berries, which we talked about earlier.
I know. For context, designer strawberries was on my overrated and underrated list. And I was thinking of these berries called Harry's berries, which is, they're grown in California. They're, in my mind, I think of Harry's berries as a designer strawberry, and then whatever. Claire was like, no, those aren't designer strawberries.
So. I was like, those are just good strawberries. I think of designer strawberries as like the like insanely expensive Japanese strawberries that are like $18 each that like you get at the end of like a super fancy like omakase or something. And I was like, those are overrated. Harry's berries are not overrated. The hype is real. What were we talking about?
Your wedding cake.
Oh, right. so we had Harry's berries, and Christina, I made that that sponge cake that we were talking about over the summer. The one from Two. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was so good. So I made this like super light, eggy, delicious sponge cake from pastry chef Melissa Chu that she did an Instagram story on BA, and I followed it and made it, and that was the base. And then I filled it with actually the same pastry cream from the book and like a bunch of macerated Harry's berries, and I made like a super elaborate like tiling of sliced strawberries on the top, and I put a little layer of like strawberry juice set with gelatin on top. And then I cut the thing and
it was a Great British Baking episode.
It was very Great British Baking. And then when I cut it, the whole thing just like squished out, much like earlier versions of my tart tripezienne.
Definitely sounds like a Great British Baking show.
Yeah, but it was good.
Okay, I'll end with one before we go to questions.
Okay.
Quince.
Oh, so underrated. I don't even know if it's underrated.
I wanted you to talk about the quince recipe in the book, which I really want to make.
Quince, I don't even know if you could call them underrated because they're not even rated. Also, Sarah Jampel just said Quince fan club.
she's a huge fan of quince.
Yeah, Sarah knows what I'm talking about. Quince, I think, are mistaken a lot there's pretty much only a farmer's market thing. I think they're grown in such small quantities in general, and I think at the market they're often mistaken for pears or apples because it kind of looks like a cross between the two. They to me are like the most alluring, magical fruits. Like one thing I love about baking is just the transformation that happens in baking. Like you put something in the oven and it comes out completely different. You know, like this brioche was like a soft, mushy dough when it went into the oven, and it comes out this like light, airy bread in the end. So quince are like that. Like quince cannot be eaten raw. They have to be cooked. And cooking or poaching them, which is how I usually cook them, turns them from this incredibly hard, like dry, cottony flesh into this like incredibly perfumed, rosy, magical, almost like semi-tropical tasting fruit. And I just think that like
a lychee sort of.
Yeah, it's like a leafy, it's like pineapple-y and lychee-y and like kind of, you know, mixed with an apple. Like it's just magical. And so
do you get so animated?
What?
You get so animated when talking about quince.
I just love them, and I feel like yeah. It's like I could probably talk about them for like 30 minutes nonstop, but they're just magical, and I love them.
Okay, so I am going to move on to a couple of questions that we got from folks who are tuning in. These are good. Okay, one is, what is the baked good / pastry that you would rather pay someone else to make instead of making yourself?
Ooh, such a good question. So do you know what I really love that I've never made, that I'm very happy to just have someone else make, is, well, there's several ways to pronounce them. Sfogliatella, which is how I say them, but like in my old neighborhood, you'd hear like sfiadelle, because of like the Italian American pronunciation, but it's like the lobster tails, you know, the Italian pastry.
Oh yeah.
Like ricotta filled, all those little layers. It is an amazing, I love watching YouTube videos of how it's made by the pros, but I'm just like, I will leave that to the pros. I do not need to make that. I'm very happy to eat it though. And I think they're delicious when they're made well, and I love them, but like probably not gonna make.
What is that pastry? Like, is it puff?
Oh my God, Christina, it is the most unreal pastry. You gotta just after this, look up a YouTube video. It's crazy. You know what? It has more in common with strudel than anything else. That kind of pastry.
Never made that category. Don't need to really.
Okay.
Okay. As a young 13 years old, as a young person who loves to bake, what advice would you give to someone who thinks culinary or pastry might be a future career?
Yeah. I mean, that's great. I love that. I would say, I mean, the advice is I would say rather general. I mean, if for someone who's considering it to be a career, I would say like, I went through a little bit of a questioning period where I was like, do I want to make baking a career, because will making something a career sort of like kill the joy a little bit? And the answer for me was no, not at all. Like I still today, I was in my kitchen baking and I was just like, this is all I want to do, you know? And so, but I think it's an important question to ask. And I think there's ways to pursue passions as hobbies and as sort of separate from your career that are like fulfilling and legit. But if you decide that that's the path you want to take, I would say, do a little work in a bakery or in a pastry kitchen at a restaurant. Like just try to get some of the professional experience. And I don't think you don't have to go to culinary school at all. Like I did, because I looked at it as an end in itself, and I just wanted the knowledge and the experience. But I studied pastry a little bit, but it wasn't the majority of my studies. So, and then even if, whether you decide to want to pursue it professionally or not, I think my advice earlier still stands, is like, you just have to practice a lot and try really making something over and over and over again, and try to make something that scares you. You know, like there's things still where I'm just sort of like, I find this thing intimidating or feels really hard, but like, I think conquering fear in the kitchen is really important, and making something that intimidates you or that you just think is hard or tricky can be really empowering when you get it right.
If you had your own ratatouille moment, do you know what I mean when I say ratatouille moment?
Yeah, or like the Proustian.
Like the Proustian melon, yeah.
Yeah.
What would that food be that would take you back? And what is the memory attached to it?
I have a few. I love that question.
Can I guess at what one might be? Because it's in the book and I'm wondering.
Yeah.
I've made this recipe. The bunt, the poppy cake.
My mind did go there for sure. Although I sort of feel like the Proustian Madeleine or the ratatouille moment is sort of also like a thing that you haven't had since childhood, kind of. And like the poppy seed cake that you're referring to in the book, which is a family recipe, one that my mom has made forever. Like I've eaten that my whole life, you know? So it's like, it doesn't necessarily recall one memory. But for me, like I have that moment every time I smell garlic sauteing in olive oil. And I have memories as a kid in the house where I was born in St. Louis, which means I was 5 years old or younger, of my dad making like linguine and clam sauce. Both my parents are phenomenal cooks and cooked all the time when I was a kid. And like we lived in St. Louis, so he used like canned clams. And I just remember thinking like, at that age, like there is no better smell in the world than garlic being cooked in olive oil, you know? So for me, that smell and eating any linguine and clams, it brings me back to that moment.
Okay, this is a question that I think a lot of people have been asking. I guess it's a question I have too, because I don't know the answer. Are you planning to do any video content independently moving forward? This is something we haven't really talked about.
Yeah. Yes, I am. I don't know exactly how yet. Like I have a personal problem, which is that I really like to do things. I really like to do tasks. I think that's why one of the many reasons why I like to bake. It's like, I like to do discrete tasks and feel like I finished something. So I have a harder time with projects that are like long-term conceptual things, you know? So it's like, that's just to say that I've been slow to plan like video, because it's like, that feels hard and I don't know how to do that really. But I feel like video content, I looked at it as, you know, like I have talked about this a lot. It wasn't something that I thought I would do in my career. It's not like the reason I get up in the morning, but I see how wonderful it is as like supporting content to the work that I do. You know, it's like, the recipes are so visual and it's so wonderful to be able to teach in a way that you can really show people. So I appreciate that aspect of it. And I Gourmet Makes was not about giving practical cooking advice to anyone, but I just feel like I love teaching and I love being able to provide that service for people. So that's where I see sort of my video work continuing. And so I do want to do it. And like now I'm sort of independent, I guess, and just trying to like figure out how to do that. So yeah, I would say the answer is yes, but like you might have to be patient because I don't know how to do it. So stay tuned.
Okay, I will end with a final question. I think this question is basically like, what do you predict or hope the standout favorite recipe will be, i.e. the one everyone bakes and shares on Instagram?
Mm.
Who's your Instagram darling?
So it's a good question because I think that any recipe like that is necessarily one that has to be kind of simple, like achievable in many different places and kitchens at many different levels. And the book has a really wide range of recipes in terms of like scope and difficulty and all that. So that's just to say that like some of the most visual recipes I think are not the ones that are the most achievable. So it's a good question. I sort of think the halva blondies could have long legs. So a lot of stuff in the cookies chapter, definitely. Maybe also a lot of the recipes are super seasonal. So, like the cover recipe is a blood orange upside down cake, which you really don't, I mean, actually you can find blood oranges a lot of places now, but like it's really a winter thing. So I don't know. What do you think, Chaey? Is there one that jumps out to you as like, I don't know, there's a bunch of quick breads, but
Okay.
also sometimes those things aren't the most visual. So I don't know.
I don't know because I feel like I just can't really wrap my head around how many recipes there are. Even I did see someone mention the cranberry pie, which I do
Oh,
think is very stunning, and I do think that is something that I think would be a really cool like fall project. And if I remember correctly, there are like a couple of really cool things in that recipe. You like sugar the cranberries, you make a mousse, like
yeah.
that one's just really fun and it looks really stunning.
Yeah, that's actually a good thought. And it is certainly, it's like obviously Thanksgiving is coming up. So I think that could be one. And that recipe is, it's like, that's a good example of a recipe that I do think is simple, but like, yes, there are a number of steps. I am obsessed with this photo because like, look at the whipped cream in this photo and how Sue
I know.
that whipped cream. It just like kills me. It's so beautiful.
Well, that and many more inside this beautiful book that I'm so happy to own. And thank you so much for inviting me to come do this talk with you. It's just so fun. It truly, like, I was like, I'm so excited, and I haven't been excited about anything in a long time. So,
Understandable. I'm so sad it's over. You want to just call me after?
I have to call Sarah.
Got it.
I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Sounds good. Thank you, Chaey, for your time tonight and for talking to me. And thank you, Books Are Magic, for hosting. And I'm so excited that this is sort of my kickoff event for the book. And it's just like pure joy. So I'm grateful that we got to do it. And you're the best. Love you.
Thank you. Thank you, Books Are